Good morning, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Glen Van Peski, Oregon, and he's going to talk to us all about. He's an entrepreneur, and he is the founder of Gossamer Gear. He's an engineer. He's a speaker and author. And today we're going to learn the key ideas about Gossamer Gear, what it is, life lessons in generosity, curiosity, and ultralight backpack. So really interesting and really happy to have him on the show. So Glenn, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Briefly introduce yourself and we will dive into the questions.
Okay, I'm a retired civil engineer, worked in land development my entire life. Along the way, accidentally started a backpacking company. And 7 years ago, we retired to Bend, Oregon. We now spend a time, I'm still involved in the backpacking company. I wrote a book recently, and we do a lot of traveling. We enjoy traveling and spending time with friends.
Really great introduction. And so we'll dive right into the questions. And first thing is talking about is, so I love interviewing entrepreneurs and what is creating ultralight equipment, revolutionizing backpacking for your company and your clients?
Well, I think so. I started the company probably 25 years ago now. And at the time, all backpacking gear was heavy. Since probably a lot of your audience isn't long distance backpackers, backpackers typically talk about a base pack weight, which is all your gear and equipment, except what you're wearing and not counting food and water. And so for reference, when I go out backpacking, usually all my gear, my pack, my sleeping pad, my sleeping bag, my cooking equipment, first aid, extra clothes, insulation, all that stuff weighs under 5 pounds. But 25, 30 years ago, all the gear that was available was pretty heavy and bomber. When our oldest son, Brian, got into Boy Scouts, went down to REI to get equipment for a week in the Sierras, and the pack they sold me weighed 7.5 pounds empty. So now all my gear weighs less than that pack 30 years ago weighed empty. And so since I knew how to sew, my mom thought every kid should leave home knowing basic skills of cooking, baking, and sewing. I started sewing my own gear. And then I put I made a lighter pack, and then, walked along thinking about how that could be improved and made another pack. And by the time I got to the fourth pack I'd sewn, it fit my needs at that point pretty well. So I put the plans on the internet. This was early internet stages, listservs and things like that. Put the plans on the internet so people could make their own for free. And I thought that would be the end of it.
Yeah. What happened after that?
Well, I kept getting requests from people to make backpacks, make one for them. And at the time, I'm working 70 plus hours a week on my engineering business. I had my own consulting engineering business. And so there's no way I had the time to sew packs for other people. So I felt bad for these people, they were having heavy packs because they didn't know how to sew. So I was talking to the sisters in Florida that I got the fabric from, and they had an industry magazine. So they said, well, there's this guy in Seattle, and, he's at least on your coast. You could give him a call. And so I called up Monty, and, he says, oh, yeah, we can make backpacks, and our minimum order is 100. And I thought, oof, I figured I needed about 25, and then everyone who was bugging me would have one, and I could get back to the engineering. We finally settled on 50 packs. I thought, they'll be in my garage for the next 5 years, but, I'll eventually get rid of them. And so my son, the oldest in Boy Scouts, put together a rudimentary website that people could place an order and it would send me an email. And one day I'm sitting at my desk and I get an email. It's like, oh, got a first order. So I grabbed a yellow pad of paper and wrote it down. I still have those yellow lined sheets of paper with those early orders. So before Monty even delivered the 50 packs, I had 86 orders. So that was my first indication that I might have misjudged the demand for a lightweight backpack.
Yeah, it sounds like you solved you had a problem or a need in your industry, and you created something that solved that problem. And it sounded like kind of people were looking for it. And so, what I love is, you help people simplify their lives through minimalism, intentionality, and ultralight philosophy to achieve greater joy, purpose, and freedom. And you do that through your gear company. And so I like to talk about the philosophy of take less and do more. And especially here in the States, it's all about consume, bigger house, car, who has, but you talk about ultralight principles in extending that into everyday life. So what is the advantage of this, and how can people start to embrace this idea of minimalism?
Well, and I will say that as far as minimalism, I do it less perfectly in other areas of my life than I do in backpacking. I've refined it obviously to the nth degree in backpacking. But as I worked over the last 50 years to reduce the amount of weight in my backpack, I realized that a lot of those lessons had applications, wider applications for life in general. When you're backpacking, you don't reduce the weight of your pack just for the fun of it. I mean, some people do, but the reason you do it is so you can do more. If you have limited time, you can do more miles if you're carrying less load. And having a lighter load when you're backpacking creates margin so that if someone that you're with, someone in the group has an issue, sprains an ankle or something, you have capacity to take on more. You can redistribute their load and, help them get back to the trailhead. Whereas if everyone's carrying very heavy packs, you don't have that capability. Also, backpacking with a lighter load gives you more ability to be curious and enjoy the trip. If you're not trudging along, looking at your feet, thinking about how heavy your pack is and how much everything in your body hurts, when you have a light load, I'm typically going out for a 3-day trip, leaving the trailhead with maybe 12, 13 pounds total in my pack. That's a different trip. Your head is up, you're enjoying the birds and the animals and the sounds and the sights. And so similarly in life in general, if we have too much stuff and I guess the pursuit of that stuff, if we're scheduling ourselves to the nth degree, we're working hard to get bigger cars and bigger houses and more stuff, we miss the opportunities to enjoy life along the way. We're so future focused that we forget to stop and enjoy the moment. And building margin is something that seems to have resonated with people from the book. I think most people want to be more generous, but they don't have an intentional way to do that. And so perhaps you find about a friend that has a bad medical diagnosis, or their car broke down and they don't have it in their budget for a new transmission. And you think, oh, I'd like to help, but gosh, I just found out my kid needs braces, or, I need to paint the house or redo the roof or something. So we're a little tight this month, and so I can't help. So what we started doing years and years ago, decades ago now, was to take a set percentage of all our income and put it in a separate checking account. And we started small, and now it's a significant portion of our income. But because you're setting aside on a regular basis, that accumulates, and it's not part of your budget anymore. So as needs, and if you decide, yes, this is something I'm supposed to help with, then you have the money because you've been intentional about setting it aside. So, creating margin in life, and not just margin in money, but margin in time and energy, then you have the ability to impact the lives of those around you.
Yeah, what's interesting is that, when I travel, there's still areas where I always can feel like I can not take with me, but there's always this voice in the head. Oh, your lips could get chapped, bring chapstick, or, or just, you could get sick. So how do you, when you're packing for these trips and, this idea of, you need this or you need that. And a lot of times, if you don't bring that, you feel this sense of anxiety. Oh, I got to bring in that as extra. How do people manage these voices? And, it's not OCD, but how do they get over this?
Well, that's a good question. And A lot of it depends on experience. So you can't really see, I guess, behind me. I have laid out on the floor all my gear for a couple weeks in the Himalayas. And I've never been to the Himalayas before. So, this is an organized tour. And so there's been feedback from the tour organizer as far as what we would need. And I'm refining some of that based on my experience, but I'm going to be heading out for like 2.5 weeks with one small carry-on, 13 pounds of gear. And that includes a sleeping bag, a lot more down clothing than I would usually take. And so I think I will probably have more than I actually need because I don't have the experience. And so I'm tending to have a little more margin. On the other hand, I've been in plenty of cold, high elevation. And so I have the ability to take some of the advice with a grain of salt and go, well, I think my solution is going to be adequate here and it's going to be lighter and more compact. So a lot of it is just experience. A neighbor was over yesterday. They're going to Costa Rica and we're talking about the amount of clothes you need to bring. And he says, yeah, I realize like I pack for a trip and I bring a lot of clothes, but when I come back, it's like, well, I wore the same two things. And so that kind of realization is important. You can go, oh, I could just take those two things and then I'd be fine because that's typically what I need. Food is one area where people tend to overpack with backpacking. And, you think, oh, I don't want to be hungry. And you put the food together and it doesn't look like that much. And, I advise people to weigh the food when they leave and then weigh it when they come back and see how much they brought back. And then, divide that weight by the number of days. And then pretty soon after a few trips, you'll hone in on your weight of food you need for backpacking. And obviously, if it's colder, you might need a few more calories, if you're doing longer days. But generally, you'll end up with a weight that, it might not look like enough, but you'll know that if you pack more than that, you're just going to be carrying that weight the entire trip and then bringing it back. So a lot of it's experience and then just being willing to kind of based on that experience, take a few chances. And it depends on the trip. If you're going by yourself, obviously there's less margin. If you forgot something, there's going to be no one else that might have it and be able to help out. So yeah, depending on the trip, be willing to refine the gear you take. And I advise people when they're going lighter to change a couple things at a time. Don't take a trip where you're doing 10 different things than you've ever done before. I'm usually on any trip, there's usually one or two things that I'm trying differently. But the bulk of my gear is stuff that I've tried and used, know that it works. So make changes slowly so you come back safely.
Yeah. And it's like, kind of like this idea of simplification and packing, the most efficient and kind of enjoying your trip. That's really, it's very intriguing. The next question I have for you is, so, you talk about take less, do more, but then you also talk about, in your book, you delve into the core themes, cultivating a mindset of gratitude and fulfillment through giving back and embracing curiosity to push boundaries and discover new possibilities. Expand upon that.
Well, a lot of times in backpacking, one thing about going backpacking with a very light load is it's a great way to build gratitude. We live such a spoiled, rich life here in the U.S., and we really don't, I think, often recognize that because we're bombarded with stories of people who have more than us. But there's nothing like going out into the wilderness with no cell coverage, sleeping on the ground on a very thin mat for days, having to treat your drinking water, bathing in cold water, to really restore your gratitude and realize what an amazingly rich life we live, what a comfortable life at home, that we can get water at any temperature we want in multiple locations in our house that's drinkable right out of the faucet. We take that for granted, but that's incredible. if you've been without for a week. And just even things like not having to worry about power, being able to plug something in whenever you want, and not have to manage the battery on your camera or phone or headlamp. So I think time in wilderness can be a huge restorer of gratitude in our lives. And, with that appreciation of how much we have, I think comes the ability to share that with others. And being grateful for what you have also, I think, can make you open to new opportunities. I was recently, a reader of my newsletter sent me a picture of a street sign from Honolulu that said "Plenty enough already," and it was a sign to encourage people to slow down. But it was, as I've come to find out, kind of calling on the Hawaiian culture of concept of plenty enough already, that we have enough in our lives, and that in striving for more, we miss out on the enjoyment that's already available to us. So I was intrigued by that. And, I think it's just a great reminder to us to remember what we have and enjoy that, and don't let the pursuit of more, blind us to the opportunities we have to connect with people that are already around us. When we're busy on our agenda, we've got our calendar schedule, we're on to the next meeting. This is one of the advantages of time in the wilderness, walking with people, is you have uninterrupted time. In our daily lives, you might get together with someone for coffee and then say, it's been great to catch up, but the hour's up. And you really don't have the chance to delve into the deeper questions of life and really get to know them and see them for who they are. But, when you're walking with someone for days, you have that opportunity. So creating that space in life to connect with people is an important lesson that I think we can take away from wilderness.
Interesting. Yeah. And I love, recently I did several experiments while traveling. And one of those was just kind of like, if you had all the time and really the outcome didn't really matter. And I learned this actually from just talking to, retired people that, had, and then they were just like, yeah, what's the worst, what's the worst that can happen is, you have the time. And, I noticed myself, I caught myself telling these stories and perceptions like, oh, the flight is late, or, oh, this and that. And it doesn't really matter. It's just, it's just what we make it out to be, which is really fascinating. And nature baths, these cold showers just kind of just bring you back and just kind of really hold and focus. So I really love that. And said, I love your story. How can people find out more about you and check out you have a book as well, and, Safe Travels to the Himalayas, and how can people find you and work with you?
The best place to find me is on my website, glenvanpeski.com. And there's information on the book there. People can sign up for my fortnightly newsletter. I have all sorts of tips and tricks so they can check out previous blog posts. I'm also reasonably active on Instagram and LinkedIn, so they can follow me there. And all that's located on the website.
Yeah, I really love that. And thanks again for dropping so much gems. And like I said, I love talking to entrepreneurs and just kind of mindfulness and spirituality, and really great conversation, and keep up the great work.
Well, thanks. Yeah. And enjoy it. It was interesting hearing your lessons from traveling, and, enjoy your future travels.